Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the our inaugural webinar, and the first webinar topic that we're going to tackle is one on interoperability. If I could just make sure that everybody who is on the call, if you could make sure that you are muted, it would just help create a more positive experience for everybody else. So just in way of introduction, for those who don't know me, my name's Andrew Scott. I've been with GMG since the beginning, since its inception. I was the first incoming chair, then followed Tim Skinner into the chair position, and then the outgoing chair. 30 years in mining, predominantly with two major mining companies, Placidome, which was taken over then by Barrick, and recently been released into the wild and having a good time, but maintaining my my involvement with GMG and trying to do what I can to drive the key issues forward for the industry as best I can. So today's topic is one that I think we've all been grappling with. It is a very large topic. We've affectionately referred to it as like trying to tackle or eat an elephant bit by bit. It's been a topic of discussion for a long time, but as we move into a more digital age, a lot of organizations are going through digital transformation projects and initiatives to improve the amount of connections and digitization throughout their companies, but also more importantly, throughout their supply chains. And so we're hitting this issue of interoperability front on, and so it's become a bit of a burning platform. There is a lot of organizations doing a lot of work around interoperability, and we'll get into how this fits in with all of those. Because one of the things that GMG is proud of, and we hold it fairly dear to our core values, is that we want to be collaborative with everybody. We don't want to duplicate any activity that's going on. Instead, we want to leverage and see where we can add value. So it's really important for us to understand who's doing what and making sure that we actually work together as an industry to drive this forward. So let's dive into the topic itself. The first thing I'll do is just a bit of a overview and background for the benefit of those who don't know much about who GMG is. So for those of you who are deeply involved with us, please excuse me as I just briefly go through a very high level sort of description of who we are. So just in terms of history, we were born out of the Surface Mining Association for Research and Technology, the SMART group. We were all very smart, but one of the things, it was an operator-only forum, and we could only move key issues only so far. It became very evident that we needed that multi-stakeholder environment to be able to address some of the key issues that were facing the industry at the time. And so since then, we found that there's a lot more opportunities and a lot more things that we need to be able to be working closely together across multi-stakeholder. So one of the things that we try to do is create that safe environment to allow for the key conversations and collaboration that's needed to take things forward. What I've got on the screen right now is essentially a pictorial that sort of highlights all our key working groups. So across the top is our working groups, starting on the left-hand side with artificial intelligence, all the way through to the energy and environmental working group that's evolving as we speak. Now, under each of those working groups, so the way we operate is essentially a key issue is brought to our attention and we look at that issue and we go, okay, does this fit into one of our existing working groups? And often it may have percolated up through some of the activity that happens within the working groups. but sometimes it can come in from all sorts of different sources, through our partnerships, through our liaison organisations, and through the community at large. So what we do is we look at can this issue be addressed or could be worked on within an existing working group? And if it is, we then bring it to the attention of that working group. Most of our working groups have steering committees, and so we leverage that to address the issue, validate the issue, and go through a process of landscape search and the necessary processes to look at, what can we do with this issue or challenge. Now, if there isn't a working group that best fits that challenge or issue, we then look to launch a new working group. And it's important for us to make sure that with the working groups that we have leadership, where we have we understand the collaboration matrix in terms of who needs to come into that working group to address those issues and those projects. And then once we've got a working group up and running, or the existing working groups go through processes of identifying key work items as projects, and there's a process by which we go through and develop those projects. Our outcomes, the actual products that we provide, is often in the form of guidelines, and those guidelines are meant to be used as a tool for the industry to drive things forward and be used in multiple sort of scenarios, as an education tool, as a reference tool, as a validation tool. So there's many different uses of the guidelines themselves. The other output that we do is white papers, and these are often to try and articulate, try and help with confusion, help with getting the industry aligned, and also to explore the topic. And often we use white papers to sort of work through and investigate possible outcomes or possible projects that can come out of that. So if anybody has any questions around the different projects, I won't dive into it any further right now, but please engage us. Now, I want to also highlight that beyond these projects and working groups, we have recently worked through this concept of strategies. And what strategies are essentially at a higher level, and can help guide working groups, can help with the prioritization of projects, derive projects. And so one of our first strategies is the one that's been really pushing this concept of interoperability alignment, and that's what we refer to as the IFSAS strategy, which is and I've got a slide to talk a little bit about that in a minute, so I'll leave that till then. We have some strategies in the pipeline. We have just recently launched the Cybersecurity working group, so it's the most recent working group. And again, if anybody has any questions around that, we can definitely provide some more information. Okay, so interoperability. I thought I'd start by putting up a definition that has been worked on by the community within the working group, the interoperability working group. Over I guess the course of the last 18 months, we have referenced this definition. It does come from a ISO definition, but there was some deliberate interactions and discussions around actually defining what we mean by interoperability. So interoperability is the ability of two or more systems or components or processes to exchange contextualized information so that they can act on this information to achieve business and operational outcomes. That contextualized word is important, and we did talk quite extensively around that. And we'll get into a bit of that in a little bit. So just back on the strategy, IFSAS. What is IFSAS? So IFSAS is the Interoperability and Functional Safety Acceleration Strategy. And this came out of essentially a need as we are deploying more and more autonomous systems throughout the industry. there are these two key issues that really need to be accelerated for some of the points that I made earlier. So interoperability being a key one, and that's the one we're talking about today. But a second one worth noting is the functional safety for autonomous systems. And it really is around how can we as an industry leverage the existing standards, other guidelines, learn from other industries, but actually get some context and some material tools for the industry. So one of the key things that we started off with the interoperability part of this strategy is to actually get a document together, and it's built off the work that was done throughout 2018, and even some work that was done prior to that, to really pull together some key principles and tenets around this topic. So it is a journey, it is a process. So the first phase of that journey has come. We've gone through a first phase, and now we're in a secondary, and we'll move into a tertiary phase. But the first phase was to really get alignment and input from the mine operators, and so there was some extensive engagement with about 40 mining companies and other related entities. And then now we're actually moving into broadening the discussion to the equipment manufacturers, service providers, and the other organizations that are working on interoperability standards, guidelines, and concepts. And these are organizations like the ISO, the Industrial Internet Consortium, and so forth. So there's engagement, and I'll touch on some updates on where we're at with that. So the key thing is to try and get a document that everybody can essentially agree to. So there is an evolution. We are going through some updates. So this is still work in progress, but this is what I'm going to step through with you is essentially the output of that interaction with the mine operators. So the first principle that we've highlighted is what is the industry priority and importance. And so this was important to basically try and highlight that there is a high priority felt by the mine operators and others actually that we need to have some alignment around interoperability. Because it is something that not one of us can do on its own. So if you look through those tenets, you know, the key pieces to that is that we need to be, I guess, grounding ourselves that we are in this process of digitization. And so we want to make sure that those processes are contributing to improvements in safety, productivity, and profitability right across all of the mining value chain. The other thing we want to really highlight is interoperability drives improved integrated performance, and we believe that by enabling the systems thinking approach and working through, we can get greater capability and value. Interoperability will not stifle innovation. This was a significant fear by a lot of people, is we want to make sure that we're not stifling innovation. If anything, we want to try and enable it and accelerate it. And that we do need to recognize that the interoperability models are dynamic and are evolving, especially as technology is maturing and we're realizing and exploring different business models. The second key principle is one around data. Yeah, don't think anybody will disagree that on a topic of interoperability, you cannot have a principle around data. So this is really talking about the fact that from a data perspective, in order to be interoperable, the data interface needs to be self-describing and conform to published open standards. And so this is basically to try and really highlight a foundational principle that we believe can move this thing forward. So just on the tenets there, again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see that there's some detail there. We've actually had some interesting conversations and some feedback from the equipment manufacturers and the service providers. So this in the tenants, so everybody's comfortable with the principle, but there is some further tweaking of the tenants. And I will note that on the the bottom one, common data definitions is an integral part, and there's a lot of initiatives underway to really understand that and evolve that. So that's a foundational piece that is underway, but there's some coordination and some leverage and some visibility that needs to happen around that. Control. So again, based on the fact that we are driving more digital systems, but not only digital, but cyber physical systems, autonomous systems, robotic systems. So control is definitely something that we need to address at a principal level. So the key here is interoperability is a key enabler to optimal operation and integration of control systems. And the real, I guess, importance here is interoperability. From a tenant's perspective, interoperability requires a standardized approach. I think most people would agree around that. And that we also need to make sure that interoperability must ensure both similar and unique multi-vendor equipment and systems is given in a given mining system can be safely integrated, operated, and maintained. So again, safety is paramount, but we need to really understand that at a base level. So I think those tenants are fairly, and I believe we don't have too many arguments around those tenants. Cybersecurity is a big one, and so this is actually reflected in the formation of the Cybersecurity Working Group. We are, through our digitization, we are definitely increasing our attack surface. So the awareness around cybersecurity is really important. But from an interoperability perspective, it's particularly important to understand from a design, implementation, and maintainability perspective. So interoperable systems are vulnerable. So that is, I think, there's no argument there. And the requirements are for secure, effective systems need to be considered. And so you can see through those tenants, there are some more detail there, but the concept here is that we want to drive further tools, and there needs to be a lot more discussion and collaboration to ensure that principle and ensure the tenants. Safety, of course, for our industry is paramount, and so interoperability features, elements, and processes must not compromise the built-in safety features below their existing level of safety. And so this is a really important one. They must follow established regulatory security requirements and safety standards. So again, there hasn't been any argument around this. Governance and certification. Now, this is an interesting one, but one that we I think needs a lot of discussion and collaboration around. But it's believed that a robust and proactive governance framework will be needed, essentially, to help with the effectiveness and the sustainability of interoperability initiatives. Now, what form that takes is still in discussion, but there is belief, and there's a lot of work going on in many standards organizations around this concept. Like, what does governance actually mean? What does certification mean? What does validation and verification mean? Are all part of this discussion. So again, this is the last principle around this, but it's an important one for the sustainability and moving forward. So, as I mentioned earlier, everything is related to everything else. So it's really important to understand how things really relate. So has been a big issue because of the complexity and because of the landscape. But working together, I think we can definitely solve some of these challenges. Now, just from where are we? What is the roadmap? So we're going through that process down the bottom there of aligning. We're essentially establishing further working groups and collaborative environments to work together. One of the ones that I mentioned earlier was around so there's a formation of what we're calling the Interoperability Organization Task Force. And what that is actually bringing together the ISOs, the IEEEs, the OGCs, the IICs, the Industry 4.0, the ISA, all of these groups that are working on activities and actually collaboratively come up with a landscape. And that landscape is really to try and map the whole ecosystem. To essentially establish who's doing what, but also to add chance to have conversations around where we can actually align and leverage off each other and be more effective across the board. There is also discussion that we're having with I guess the big tech of town, so the Googles, the Microsofts, the IBMs, etc., to also leverage their experience, but also some of the challenges that they've been experiencing. And we all use their products, whether we like it or not. We touch, or they touch our lives pretty much in all aspects. So we need to leverage that. There is further deeper dive with the equipment manufacturers and greater service providers and others. And so we're in a process of education, alignment, but also keeping the conversation going and really driving down to realize some outputs. The other thing that's happened is we have a formation of a steering committee, and the role of the steering committee is, and it's at a senior level, so the participants on that steering committee are at very senior levels within their companies. They represent the ecosystem, mine operators, equipment manufacturers, service providers, and we even have a input from the regulatories ecosystem. So we're leveraging that to really help us prioritize, but also help us really answer the question of what does commitment look like? What does enablement look like? And really drive some of that through their networks, through their relationships, but also through their experience, knowledge, and expertise. So that is now in place. And like we have the task force that I've mentioned already. And we've got basically a series of activities to really try and drive this topic forward. We're further supporting the existing test beds that are around globally, and we'll admit there's more work to do in that area, but we're also looking for where we can leverage and help those test beds be more effective, because we need those test beds to really demonstrate capability, demonstrate what true interoperability looks like. Where are some of the challenges? Another action that has come out of our leadership summit just recently is the formation of an API library and case studies around the use of those APIs. There's a conversation that we're also having around what does a maturity model look like for APIs. Do we need essentially a maturity model to indicate if there is a mission critical system of systems, what is that level that we require? So if it's mission critical, maybe a maturity level 4 or 5 is necessary, but how do we validate that? How do we verify that? But if it's for something that's not necessarily mission critical, but it's a key enabler, like through data visibility and analytics, a 1 through to 3 may be sufficient. So those types of discussions are happening right now, and we're moving that forward. So I think that's where I'll pause it, and I'll open up to questions. So in order to ask a question, is you can use the chat feature to ask your question if you don't want to actually say it, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. And everybody should be able to unmute yourself. Well, if there is no questions, I want to encourage you to, if you do think of something that you wanted to ask, or that you wanted to. Oh, okay, here we go. We do have a question. What is the next step you most want us to take? I think it's if you haven't read through this alignment document, please do so. If you haven't seen or been involved in any of the working group workshops or activities, I implore you to reach out to us. We will get you onto the collaborative site so that you can see the activities. If you are a representative of either an organization that is doing interoperability work, we want to hear from you, and we want to get you into the discussion with the task force around mapping out the landscape and also providing input. If you are with a mining company and want to know more, please let us know. We'd love to explain further, but also to get your input. If you're with an equipment manufacturer and have some concerns or want to further understand it, please reach out to you. So that's probably the next step that I want you to take. And this webinar will be made available as a recording, so you can actually, if you have other people that want to be aware of this, as you can use this as an introductory. Okay, we have a second question. What is the scheduled milestone dates for the next couple of phases, understanding that the first phase has been completed? So as I mentioned, this is part of an acceleration strategy. So we're working hard to try and move as quickly as we possibly can. So what we're trying to do is actually further the conversation, but more importantly, get the alignment document. So essentially those 6 principles and tenets, and have them locked down as best we can by into Q1. So we're actually targeting to have it completed by March. But also what we mean by that is that we actually have canvassed all the ecosystems. But the other phases are happening in parallel. So there is work on seeing where we can accelerate. So I mentioned the API library. So we're opening that up, and we've got some companies already donating and supplying some use cases and some APIs. We are engaging, like I said, with big tech to get some guidance around what they do from that perspective. So there is, it's not a linear process. There is multiple pathways. So hopefully that answers your question. But from a visibility perspective, we are trying to get more of that visibility on what's happening, when, and how people can actually get engaged. We got a question from Leaf. Funding has been received from BHP and Rio Tinto. Have other operators been involved with the to date and expressed interest in funding? So the question, so yes, is the answer to that. But like I said, we had engagement with 40 plus mine operators, but we're further expanding that. We're leveraging our leadership council, which is it does represent a significant number of mining companies. We're also leveraging our partners. And so we are working closely with the ICMM. We're working closely with all the industry bodies, CIM, AusIMM, South African IMM, SME. We're leveraging all of those relationships to sort of get that involvement. From a funding perspective, there are other companies that have been helping with funding, but also more importantly with engagement and in-kind support. So I think that might be it. And I'm conscious of time. We do try and keep us to time, so we're at time there. But I do want to implore you, if there are any further questions and you need to and you want to ask them, please send them through. Any suggestions, any concerns, we want to try and answer those. We are continually working on how we can improve our engagement and accessibility. So we really want to try and improve that. And so you will be seeing a lot more visibility. You will be seeing a lot more options to get engaged. We actually just spent a couple of days going through our 2020 planning. And so you'll be seeing some updates to the calendar of events. You're going to see some, in addition to that, calendar of key workshops. And also get more visibility on some key calls and methods of engagement. So with that, I want to thank you for joining. And if you do, there will be a link to this video. So if there are other people that you wish to bring up to speed, please, I do implore you to send the link on and get involved. Thank you very much.